Welcome to episode 10 of Motivating Mondays, a weekly podcast and YouTube series dedicated to helping Canadian job developers and other employer engagement professionals develop the tools, resources, expertise, and network to excel in achieving sustainable employment outcomes for their clients and students. My name is Christian St. Cyr, National Director of the Canadian Job Development Network, and today we're talking about pay transparency and how employers who are transparent about wages are great employers. About 2 years ago, I shared a social media post on proposed legislation in British Columbia requiring employers to include salaries or salary ranges in their job postings. Now, this was the most popular social media item I ever shared, generating nearly 250,000 impressions on LinkedIn. Workers and job seekers care passionately about wage transparency, and employers who excel in the competition for job talent and skilled talent should embrace this change, not try to skirt it. For a little history, British Columbia enacted pay transparency legislation in 2023, and by 2026, all employers with 50 or more employees will be required to post pay transparency reports on an annual basis. Both Newfoundland and Labrador and Prince Edward Island enacted similar pay transparency legislation in 2023 and 2022, respectively. Provincial pay transparency is gradually being enacted across the country. On January 1st, 2026, Ontario-based employers will be required to include total compensation, including base salary, bonuses, and commissions, or a range of expected compensation up to $50,000. This new legislation is having a huge impact on job postings. Last year, Indeed Hiring Lab reported that almost half, 49% of Canadian job postings featured on Indeed featured pay information, and that was up from 22% in 2019. 2019, 22% of jobs had pay information. Almost half of job postings by 2024 had wage information. Unfortunately, requiring employers to do something isn't always going to produce the best results. While most job postings now advertise pay, salary information has become less precise. The median gap between low and high wage estimates, including job postings without ranges, rose 18% in early 2024, up from just 10% 5 years earlier. Less than 1/3 of postings in several white-collar fields mention pay, compared to more than 60% of job postings among jobs that predominantly pay by the hour. Pay ranges tend to be wider among higher-paying occupations. This would suggest that some employers are reserving higher wages for workers who are perceived to be more valuable. Unfortunately, all too often, this means that marginalized workers who are more likely to accept a job offer because they're not getting any other will be relegated to lower wages. While employers are sharing elements of wages, some are failing to create a more equitable wage structure. Because legislation has come so quickly, many employers are now posting wages without a corporate strategy. Only 16% of Canadian employers have implemented a pay transparency strategy, while 41% have strategies in development and 22% plan to develop a strategy within the next year. This is according to a recent survey by Mercer. The survey, which polled 1,100 global companies, found that 60% said that sharing pay ranges, that they were sharing pay ranges, but this is expected to rise to 94% within the next 10 years. This is a global trend. Now, Caitlin Huron, who's legal counsel with ADP Canada, had some thoughts on this. Caitlin said, regardless of legislated requirements, employers in any province can promote equity in the workplace by including expected salary ranges in job postings and publishing detailed pay transparency reports. So she's encouraging people to this. She said, encouraging open dialogue about pay equity and protecting employees from reprisals for discussing compensation are essential. Employers should base compensation on the value of the work performed, ensuring no pay differences between employees doing comparable work. Documenting these practices and making them accessible fosters transparency and trust. She said, pay transparency measures can also support employers' attraction and retention strategies by promoting fairness in the hiring process and helping candidates make informed decisions. Keeping applicants informed about the hiring process enhances their experience and strengthens the employer's brand reputation, attracting stronger talent and aiding in employee retention. She concluded by saying, in addition to supporting employees, pay transparency can also bolster an employer's reputation among workers and in the general public. And this is where I'm talking about great employees. Huron says that companies that are perceived as lacking corporate responsibility and fairness might face challenges to their public image and a bad reputation. Such reputational concerns make it more difficult to attract investors and business partners, potentially impacting the company's financial health. Employers may also face legal risks, including lawsuits and regulatory penalties, which can further impact their reputation. Employers should prioritize compliance with pay transparency requirements to mitigate these risks and help maintain a positive reputation. The top pay transparency initiatives by Canadian employers, including making pay adjustments to align with the external market, internal pay compensation, and pay equity considerations, were responded by 55% in the survey. Conducting pay equity studies was noted by 47% of respondents, and reviewing current raw pay gaps was noted by 45% of respondents. So employers are approaching pay equity in different ways. And I will say that a lot of this is about compliance. This is about provincial or national governments enacting pay equity legislation. And 77% of employers around the world, global employers, said this is a key driver in their strategy. But another 50% said that increased employee satisfaction and aligning with company values are also additional leading drivers. So employers are being forced to do it, but many are also choosing to do it for internal reasons. Companies reported taking actions such as addressing competitive pay practices, 57%, ensuring that wages are reflective of the industry or leading in the industry. Developing updated compensation structures and ranges, so ensuring that there is predictability to it. And enhancing job architecture, 52%, being mindful of what the job looks like in exchange for the noted wage. Only 11% of employers said that they're not taking any action or developing any policies or practices. More than 2/3, 69% of global employers agree that pay transparency is an expectation of candidates. Roughly a third, 32%, said that they feel prepared to meet global transparency requirements, and only 4% strongly agree that they are ready for the impact of global pay transparency requirements. So, why should employers embrace pay transparency regulations rather than grudgingly comply with them? Well, let me share with you an analogous story. Last year, I interviewed the president of a large provincial trucking association as part of our annual labor market conference. I was amazed by the new initiatives the association was embracing, such as electronic logbooks and speed governors and truck inspections and increased training and certification. And I remember saying to this president, this must be very costly and very frustrating to the company owners. And his reply was really interesting. He said, our members embrace these changes because they make the industry better, they generate more qualified truck drivers, and they ensure safer roads. And I'll say extemporaneously, it also improves the wages and working conditions of truck operators. He said some employers reject these changes, and they are always the companies with the worst reputations, the most unsafe vehicles, and the most dissatisfied workers. He said, frankly, we don't want these companies in our association. Now, companies that are fixated on secrecy in job postings are the same. These companies that forbid employees from discussing salaries and may even fire them for doing so are often creating a toxic environment where employees only reluctantly go to work for them, and which only serve as an example which makes employees at large distrustful of employers. I will say that provincial governments aren't the only levels of government that are doing this. Certainly, municipal governments have commitments to pay transparency. But last year, the Government of Canada also launched something called Equivision. Now, it's a new website, and it shines light on the barriers to equity experienced by women, Indigenous peoples, persons with disabilities, members of visible minorities, and federally regulated private industries. It also provides user-friendly, easily comparable data on workforce representation rates and the pay gaps experienced by members of the 4 designated groups recognized under the Employment Equity Act. With Equivision, Canada becomes the first country in the world with this level of information publicly available. And I would highly recommend you look at it because you're really breaking it down for individual companies. Equivision data is submitted by employers with 100 or more employees as part of their annual reporting to the labor program under the Employment Equity Act. Individual employee information isn't shared. There's no data related to individual salaries that is reported or disclosed. It's just for the organization. And while this applies to federally regulated employers, we want to remember this is a very big sector. The federally regulated sector comprises about 19,000 employers that employs almost 1 million workers. So, clearly, wage transparency is a trend. But what do we do with it in the job development context? It would help employers if you were to share information about these changes and encourage them to develop pay transparency policies. If you're in a province that has already enacted pay transparency legislation, encourage employers to post wages if they aren't already doing so. A great strategy is to measure employers based on their willingness to share wages in the first place and discuss pay equity. Employers who have a positive attitude about both will be more willing to consider hiring individuals with challenges to employment. Just like with the trucking companies that embrace change, these will be the ones who workers most want to work with. Employers who embrace wage transparency will also be the employers that you, as a job developer or employer engagement professional, will most want to work with. This is a reality of job development. In your community, not all employers are going to embrace job development services. Perhaps only 20% of employers are willing to consider your services or supports. Wage transparency can be a great way for employers to find employers who are more likely to hire your clients or students. Look for employers that embrace wage subsidy. They are the pathway forward. I want to thank you so much for joining us. Please click like or subscribe in the button on your platform. We'd also love it if you could rate or review this podcast. Now, we do these sessions live and for free every Monday morning with job developers from across Canada, and we'd love it if you could join us. Just go to jobdevelopment.org to learn more. If you have any questions, send us an email at info@jobdevelopment.org. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have an amazing week.